1. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, political pluralism and collaboration is good, but it's only good insofar as it's strategic to your principle and it's strategic with your long-term interest. In a world where geopolitically we see the rise of far right-wing leaders who eventually crowd out discourse amidst the far right, like what we see with Le Pen in France, Meloni in Italy, or even Donald Trump and the strongman rhetoric that even previous speaker characterizes to be happening within the right movement, is exactly the point in which the voices and stances of centrist and moderate leaders within the EPP, and as a consequence affecting the entire voter base, ultimately get drowned out and diluted at the point in which they capitulate and genuflect to far-right political ideology because of their desire to be able to get clout, to be able to get media coverage, and to be able to get relevance. Yes, this is something that at best may be okay in the short term, but ultimately sacrifices your long-term interest wherein it creates infighting within the party and ultimately merely creates an illusion of control. But in reality, because the voices of the right, particularly the far right, are so strong, it ultimately shifts the Overton window from moderate and centrists to the right, which ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, is a fundamental attack which undermines what it truly means to be a moderate and centrist in terms of political strategy, and is bad in the long term because even if at best you get coverage, it becomes the bad kind of coverage, and the very people who funded you, who donated to you, and expected you to carry out policy ultimately get wrecked and ultimately get blasted to the sidelines. I have a couple of features from opening opposition clash for a very good and clear debate. Number 1, this is a value judgment debate about what exactly is the interest of moderate and centrist party. This happens on a timeline. We're going to look at long term, but make no mistake, right? This is not just a debate about whether short term or long term actually is better or not, but this is uniquely about political consistency and sustainability in order to be able to preserve and protect the ideologies and remain as well politically important in order to be able to get votes. Because I empathize and understand with the previous speaker. Yes, getting votes is important, but just because we can doesn't mean we should, meaning we shouldn't just hop over to whoever is hot right now in terms of issue because we want to latch on our political ideology to them. That is to say, we reject this OG push that it's solely about being able to get votes. It's also about being able to preserve the persona and identity of their ideology at the point in which these far right-wing ideologies are fundamentally incompatible with what it means to be a moderate and centrist politician, party, and individual. This is because historically we've seen far right factions involving themselves in things like xenophobia, ultranationalism, and even anti-democratic values. And this is something that the previous speaker admits himself when they talked about these ideas of abortion, anti-LGBTQ, etc., which ultimately lead to sacrificing the stance of these particular moderate and centrists when it contradicts it. What exactly are the stances of these moderate and centrists? We didn't get that from the previous speaker. A couple of things. A, it can mean not taking a stance at all because you don't want to alienate your rather pluralistic voter base. B, a wait-and-see approach given a lot of political volatility that we see around the world, meaning we don't have to choose something right now. It's completely fine to not take a stance. And C, most importantly, keeping moderate and centrist value as a swing state, meaning you aren't necessarily far left or far right. In fact, the principle in and of itself of being moderate and centrist is to be able to de-radicalize the entire Overton window wherein you literally don't identify as left or right. That in itself is valid. Let's defend our counterfactual. Our counterfactual is the full range and spectrum of the Overton window at the point in which we respect and understand political sensitivity. We think it's fundamentally valid and legitimate not to take a stance and even to reject far left and far right ideology, which is historically the precedence of what it truly means to be a moderate or a centrist. And we think the point in which you capitulate to one side, because the previous speaker said, we also don't want to go far left, is the point in which it harms the particular individuals. What is the argument coming from our side? Quite simple, responses will be integrated. The argument is that the radicalization of centrist and moderate ideology, when you align with the right, precisely because of the tendency of the right to go far right, is exactly where you drown out and stifle discourse, and it leads to the shifting of ideology to the right, which makes it hard and bad for the centrist and moderate individuals who in the long term still want to preserve their political ideology. First layer of analysis here is taking a look and examining the accounting of what exactly happens in the policy. And we get that from the previous speaker. Things like very strong immigration laws, things like tariffs, things like anti-LGBTQ, and even supporting or not supporting abortion and being against women. This is something that we've seen the right do so much with the case of Meloni, and ultimately what this does is that it bastardizes what it truly means to be a centrist at the point in which these fundamental ideologies you used to not support, you're now likely being forced to support at the point in which the party you're doing is aligning with them. Why is radicalization likely to happen? Radicalization is likely to happen given the strongman persona and narrative the previous speaker talked about. Because they have to shout louder instead of improving the argument that these people do in status quo, these particular individuals, because of the way media sensationalizes things, likely is going to push the party to have to cater to them. The point in which they don't do that is the point in which they question the contribution of the particular moderate and centrist party, meaning they're going to sort of gaslight them in terms of saying, hey, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything and everything that comes your way. If you want political relevance, you have to go to our ideology if you want to get a seat. Putting that carrot and dangling it in front of them because of short-term political interest is exactly what harms them in the long run, because the very people who donated and voted for them in power ultimately expect them to be consistent with that ideology, and ultimately we see that not happening. Ultimately, we think that it's a terrible idea. It sacrifices your ability to truly make decisions and kills and assassinates what you truly stand for in the long run. We are very proud to stand on side opposition and open this debate.